Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Warriors webinar, Effective Diversity Strategies and Inclusion Tools. My name is Mercedes LaBelle. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at Northern Policy Institute based in Sudbury, Ontario. And before we get started, NPI would like to acknowledge the First Peoples on whose traditional territories we live and work. We're grateful for the opportunity to have our offices located here, and we thank all generations of people who have taken care of these lands. Though we're virtual, each community is home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We recognize and appreciate the historic connections that Indigenous peoples have to these territories. We support their efforts to sustain and grow their nations. We also recognize the contributions that they have made in shaping and strengthening local communities, the province, and Canada. I'd like to introduce Jamie Saulnay, President of Working Warriors. Jamie graduated from NAIT in Edmonton, Alberta as a journeyman welder. In 2001, he started an industrial construction company focused on capital projects in the resource sector. In 2008, with the realization of a pending labor shortage facing Canada, Jamie set out to build a training program that would give Indigenous peoples the tools needed to enter the workforce. What followed was the creation of the award-winning platform Working Warriors, a software and consultancy firm that maximizes employment and economic development opportunities for Indigenous peoples and the industry. The success of this initiative has landed Jamie on the pages of the Globe and Mail, the Winnipeg Free Press, CBC Radio, and several trade magazines. He's also participated in several roundtable discussions with industry, government, and Indigenous groups. Now, before I turn the floor over to Jamie, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with attendees after the event concludes. There's also going to be a Q&A session at the end, so if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box down below here, and we'll address them at the end of the session. Now I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll turn the floor over to Jamie.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Mercedes, for the introduction and for hosting the event today. As Mercedes indicated, my name is Jamie Saulnay. I'm the owner and founder of Working Warriors. A little bit about myself. I grew up in a little mining town in northwestern Ontario called Ignace. I graduated from high school and went straight to a career in the mining industry. I worked underground in the mining industry for close to 10 years. I started off as a tradesman. I worked my way up to a superintendent in charge of actually building mines. And in 2001, I formed my own company. And at the time, it was just myself as a little maintenance company. And we ended up growing that into a major EPC with about 600 employees. And the company itself has worked in Canada, the US, overseas in South America, and really focusing on major capital projects within the resource sector. So oil and gas, mining, forestry, so forth and so on. Part of that work, working in construction, led me to working with Indigenous communities very early on. And I recognized that we had a part to play in providing opportunities to, and by that I mean the construction companies had a part to play in working with Indigenous communities across Canada. And so we started a small program. It was called the Indigenous Apprenticeship Program. It's something that we created together with the province of Manitoba. It was about a 150-page apprenticeship program that started from zero and then worked our way through the process with an individual all the way up to them gaining their red seal. And so it was an internal program that we built. We were very proud of the program, and it was only intended to be something that we used within our construction firm. However, communities became very interested in our program, as did employers, and so we had to make a decision to pivot from construction, which I did. I left the construction company to my business partners. I'm no longer involved in it, and I set out on my own to develop what is now called the Working Warriors program. So, with that said, what I'll do is I will share my screen, and I'll go through the process. So a little bit about Working Warriors. Again, the idea behind this was that we had several groups that were involved in the overall engagement process. We had communities, employers, individuals, and government organizations or employment and training organizations. So we had to really take a good look at, at first what the communities were facing. And one of the big things that we found was when it came to engaging with Indigenous communities, the communities themselves often did not have information on their assets related to economic development or assets related to human resources. So by that, I mean, when I'd first come to a community and I'd say I'm an employer and we're looking to hire members from your community, often we had a hard time even getting a response from the community. And when we did, there was a lot of things that were, unorganized in terms of where the resumes were, how recent they were, did the individuals still live in the communities, and so forth and so on. And so we found it very, very difficult for not only us to engage as a company with the nations, but we also found it very interesting that the process of developing partnerships with nations, and by that I mean impact benefit agreements, Indigenous participation plans, anything that industry would do, when they're working in partnership with one of the communities. And so we heard over and over and over in years past that a lot of these partnerships with industry didn't end up exactly how they wanted to do. So we had a really strong look at that, and it's pretty easy to figure out that if you're setting targets for employment on a project and you're setting them as a percentage of 5, 10, 15, 20%, but you have no idea how much the community can participate, well, then you're working with fictitious numbers. And so a lot of times, companies and governments or whoever would stand up and say this is going to lead to hundreds of jobs for the Indigenous communities. But at the end of the day, if we didn't know what the Indigenous communities had to offer, then that wasn't a correct statement. So we set out to first work with the communities to understand their HR and whether or not they had departments, whether or not they had info, all of that information. And from that, we developed a very, very small program at the very beginning. What it was a disc. And this is 17 years ago I started this program. So it was a disc, and we travel from community to community, and we'd put the information onto a disc, and then it get transferred to a stick, and we'd give it to the community. And it was a mess. But it was a trial and error. And finally we came up with a great program that allows us to, capture this information on the communities and use and empower the communities for them to use this information in whether or not it's employment training, whether or not it's economic development, so forth. The second group that we work with is the employers. And as you can imagine, when I started this again 17 years ago, I don't even know if the word corporate social responsibility was a thing yet. People were talking about it, but certainly a lot of the companies in Canada and around the world that I work with really didn't have a grasp on an effective engagement strategy for the communities. Again, this was not something that was taught in colleges or universities on how to engage and protocols when meeting with communities and elders and all those types of things. So we really had to understand where employers were in this whole entire process and what they were doing. And so again, from all of that information, for me working in the industry, knowing throughout the entire supply chain how things work, we were able to build some programs again, which I'll get to, that are there to assist the employers and of course individuals. So individuals that are living either on reserve or off reserve, we needed to set up a system so that they're not reliant specifically on employment training from their community, that individuals can build their own resumes and they can get out and market themselves to employers across Canada. And the last one is organizations. Again, you can see this list here: JEDI and Native Women's Association of Canada, and Karma and Contact North. These are all great organizations that provide a lot of wraparound services for education and training, but for some reason are not utilized by employers. And when I looked at this whole process before, you would see that organizations, individuals, employers, and the communities were all working within their own silos. And so it was difficult for communities to get jobs because they weren't talking to employers, and employers couldn't get wage subsidies because they didn't know who to talk to down here. And so the whole idea was to build a communication tool, and this is the result, and it's called Working Warriors. So I'll go through it now. The first thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to develop a space for communities. So what we did was we have built an individual website for every single First Nation, Métis, and Inuit group across Canada. And the idea behind that, again, is when an RFP comes out, which is a request for proposal, or anything comes out as an employer, from an employer standpoint, that asks you about your Indigenous participation plan, or are you engaged with some communities and so forth. Doesn't matter if it's an RFP from the government of Canada or from Walmart or from a mine. If it's asked, companies are starting to scratch their head right away. And so, they didn't understand if a community didn't have a website, or if community didn't have information that would lead them to a contact, the community was forgotten, or was just put in the RFP that we weren't able to reach these communities. So long story short, we built a website for every single community in Canada on this. And the idea behind it was that the community would be able to showcase who they are as a community. So again, this is their profile. This is some information on the community. I think it's very important for companies to understand the origins and the history of the community. So this gives anybody who's wanting to engage with the community some information on who they are, their history, and things of that nature. It also provides them with a contact information. So this is Merity, this is their email address, this is their phone number, this is the address, and on the top, here's a map. So there's everything you need to know to engage the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. Each of the communities themselves also have their own job board. So it allows communities, when they come onto their site, to come in here and post a job. And they can post a job. This is for a child welfare representative, gives you all the information on the position that's available, and you can apply directly to the community from this page. So essentially with this, it means that the communities, every single community in Canada has its profile put in it, where we don't have every community in here now. I think we're close to 400. And the idea is that by the end of the year, we will have all of Canada's nations, or those that want to be part of the Working Worse program, built into the system, so that anybody wanting to engage with the communities at least has the contact information that they can start the process with. And this is really where the engagement process starts. Once we built this for the communities, the second thing we had to do was we had to build a profile for the individuals, or a space for the individuals, where we could gather the information on the individuals who are part of the community. So simply, it is as simple as this. Individuals come in, they select their community, whether or not they're Indigenous, non-Indigenous, Métis, so forth and so on, what their home community is. Again, we've got every single community in Canada and the United States built into the Working Worse platform. Individuals come in here. We don't gather things like social insurance numbers and stuff like that, because anything that's delicate, we don't really want to keep any of that information. We don't want to have it shared on the internet or any of those types of things. So we just gather basic information. So where you're from, your address, your contact information. We gather information on your employment. So whether or not you're seeking an upgrade, are you willing to travel, are you willing to relocate, are you currently working, so forth and so on. We have a resume builder in here. And this was an important piece of that. So well, the resume builder works is you just come in here simply after you log in, you come in here and you add your name, your position, where you work, so forth and so on, any volunteer experience you've done. If you've been into an apprenticeship, we've got all the apprenticeships built into the system. So all the way through, what type of apprenticeship it is, state to, from, so forth and so on. Any skills and safety training that you've done. This is an important one, because what we found for a lot of employers, a lot of communities, a lot of anybody that goes to work, is that we have specific safety needs that are mandatory when you're working on a site. And what ends up happening is communities or employers end up providing their employees with this training, but then the individuals themselves are given the certificates for their training, and almost every time they're lost, but they put them on a resume. And so when an employer calls and says, do you have fall arrest, do you have WMIS, do you have this, can you send me all your tickets? If you're not able to do that, you're going to be out of a job. So what we do is we come in here and we grab all the information on the employer, the trade level, anything that you've done for your safety training, anything to do with certificates. We have a section in here, which I'll show you in a second, or I can show you right now, where you can go in here and you add all your attachments. So if you have attachments for not driver's license, any safety training you've done, any post-secondary education that you've done, All that can be saved and uploaded to your profile so that you can share that with employers should you wish to. And then on the resume side again, so you can come in here, put in your education in, where you went to school, what your area of study was, did you do a degree, what was the degree name, have you completed this, all this information. And the idea behind this is that by gathering this information, this all gets attached, the individual's profile gets attached to the community itself. Oops, sorry. And so the communities then have this information which they can use when they're negotiating. So for instance, if they're going to build, if there's a new highway coming through, and we want to understand how many people have experience with heavy equipment or engineering or whatever the case may be, this allows the community to say, well, we have this many people with this many credentials, and based on the jobs that are going to be available on this project, we can say that we have this many people that can participate if given the opportunity. So that allows people to start setting goals. So again, if they're looking for 100 people to operate equipment to build this highway, and the community has 17 people that can do that, at least we know now we're shooting for a target of 17 people to be able to get jobs. And then the rest of individuals who are close, we look at employment and training to be able to bring them to an employable level. So after we've set this up for the communities, so the communities have their own profile now, and the individuals have their own profile now where they can build their resumes. That information is all attached to the community, and the back end of the community's page. Every single community has a dashboard. Within that dashboard, it lists them all their community members. There's all kinds of reporting they can look to in terms of, how many people have their grade 12, what's the age demographics of their workforce, what's the gender of their workforce, what is the specific trades. We use something called the NOC codes of Canada to track these things, and so we can tell exactly an individual, or sorry, the community can print out a report to say this is exactly what our workforce looks like in X community. The third thing that we had to do is we had to find a space for employers to be able to engage. So again, diversity in the workplace wasn't something that we talked about too much 20 years ago, but is definitely front and center for a lot of the discussions I'm having, not only in Canada, but United States, Australia, South America, and so forth and so on. So what we had to do is we had to create space, much like the communities, for employers to come in and share their jobs. So the way this works is that I'll get to the end result is the job board, which we'll get to in a second, but the idea behind this was that if we had companies that would post their jobs, those jobs are shared with the members of Working Warrior. So not only all the community members who can log in and see all these jobs, but really anybody in Canada that's looking to apply for a job at one of these companies can go and do that, right? So an example is Aecon. This is a major construction company across Canada. Again, it's the same thing. It talks about who the company is, what they do, so forth and so on. And then this is much like the community profile I showed you. This is a profile for the company itself, where they specifically take the information about their Indigenous engagement strategies and all the work that they're doing, and they lay it out in this profile, where anybody who wants to know really about what this company does in terms of engaging with nations or their diversity programs, they can really learn a lot of that information on the company's profile, which is part of this whole entire process. So they come in, this is information about them, this is all their jobs. So every single job, so we set up a job scrape. So essentially we go in, and we scrape your job board, and all those jobs are listed on your company profile, which is right here. So individuals can come on if they want to search jobs at Aecon. They can see this is a pipefitter superintendent. They can come in, they can read all about what the job is, and underneath that they can just apply. We don't stop any resumes from coming to us first and then off to companies like Aecon. It's causes, I don't need to touch this 20 times. The idea behind this is to be able to connect individuals to the employers, and this is exactly what this does. So this job for piping superintendent was posted on Working Warriors. It was shared with all of our members. So it reached out to Indigenous communities from coast to coast, and all of our training organizations and employment agencies that we work with across Canada. This job was posted to all of them. And then individuals, like I said, can come in here and apply for this job, and it goes directly to ACOM. It is not stopped by us. And there's a dashboard on the back end for each employer as well that talks about how how many jobs were applied for and so forth and so on. The other thing that I wanted to show you on the employers page, and this is an interesting one. So for a lot of companies across Canada, when they receive an RFP, it's specific to the region. So let's just say we're going to build a new mine, and that new mine is going to go in Northern Ontario. Well, within the partnership agreement that's established with the nations, which is this long process, which part of it is, and a huge part of this on any new project in Canada is how we're going to involve local communities. Doesn't matter if they're Indigenous communities or just communities that are living in the area. A huge emphasis goes on this on their community participation plan. And so for companies who are looking to dedicate specific time and information to those communities, we've developed this process. So for example, we have a projects page. So ACOM, if they're going to build a project in Ontario or Alberta or wherever the case is, they have the ability to come in here to their site. So they log into their site, come to the dashboard, come to the projects, add a new project. And this is simply how this works. So the companies can come in here, and on the company profile page, they have a description of their project. I mean, it's pretty simple. All the things that you saw in the banner image, the location of the project. So where is it located? Canada, US, province, all those types of things. This is where you add all the information. So you just copy and paste text right out of your project into here. And this is really where the magic happens, is that we attach all the social media links to this thing, any additional emails. So why we have additional emails in here is if a job's posted to the communities and the employer itself wants to track how many jobs were posted, any feedback, emails, so forth and so on, all we do is we can add as many as you want. If you're the company and you're mining company X, you can add all your emails into that, and you get a copy of all the correspondence that's going on between your contractors and your communities and so forth. So to set this up, so if we're going to build a new mine in Ontario and we had a partnership agreement, or the mining company had a partnership agreement with Big Grassy, Bearskin, and Adwapscot, let's just say, what this does is, because these communities have already have a profile set up in the system, and it's connected to their employment training department, through the HR, then what happens is that every single piece of information on this project, whether it's whether or not it's a job fair, whether or not it's a employment opportunity, whether or not it's a training opportunity, all the information is shared on the company's project page. So that's one point of contact. So if you can imagine, when you're building a mine, you're going to have maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 general contractors. Underneath those general contractors, you're going to have hundreds, or a lot anyways, of subcontractors that are supporting everybody. And if everybody's running their own Indigenous program, meaning from the owner to the general contractor to the subs to everybody throughout the supply chain are asked to engage with the nations, as you can imagine, on one project, you're going to end up having 10, 20, 30 engagement processes. And it's very, very confusing for the communities. It's very confusing for the owners of the project, because tracking all of that information and reporting on that information becomes very difficult. So by that, I mean, if you go to a community meeting and you say, how many jobs were posted this week? How many jobs were filled this week? What communities were they filled by? What is their trade? What is their hours? What is all this information that were often asked in the beginning? It was very, very difficult to track that. So by setting it up in a situation like this, where we can have a project page, well, all this information is funneled into one spot. So meaning everybody who's involved in that project posts their jobs, posts their training, posts their everything. The communities can come in here, they can see the jobs, leadership can see the jobs, everybody can see what's happening with the project, which makes it very, very transparent. And so then what ends up happening is, after the project is set up, we can come back in here to ACON. Now they have a project. So these are a couple projects they're doing. So this is Fortis. This is a new pipeline that's being built in British Columbia. So within ACOM's profile page, they have a list of all their jobs, like I said. So this is their profile. This is a list of all their jobs, and this is where their contractors can log in. So simply what they do is they in the RFP process. So I can tell you this right now. We just signed a contract with a global mining company here in Canada last week. And essentially what happens is that every RFP that's released, a link is posted into the RFP that talks about Indigenous engagement, that it's an owners-led program, meaning that the contractors themselves are not asked to develop their own plans. The plan is, here's a link to Working Warriors. This is where you come in here and post your jobs. This is where you post your business opportunities. This is where you post your training opportunities. And then this is seen by the contractors and by the owner themselves. So when the link is put up, the company itself gives us a list of the contractors who are going to be involved. We get the contractors registered into the system, and once they're into the system, they can now post their jobs and post everything directly to this would be this page. So they post all their jobs to this and all their business opportunities specific for this project. So the company has their own profile for all their corporate jobs, but then they also have a page for all their individual companies. So what this does is this ensures that an engagement strategy is in place from the owner's level, from the engineer's level, from the GC level, from the sub level, all the way through the process of engagement. There's a process in place that allows everybody to share their information, which at the end of the day creates opportunities. And the only way we're able to create change in communities, I feel, is by providing opportunities to individuals and to Indigenous businesses. So what this means is that when we stand up on a podium in front of a community or from anybody and say, this is a great project that's going to lead to great jobs and everything else, well, at least we're giving people a path to follow to be able to access all those opportunities, because often we hear big project, lots of jobs, and then people scratching their head as to how do we access these jobs. And then it even goes from there even further down to leadership in communities saying, again, we were promised jobs, our members aren't getting jobs, we need to host a meeting. And this is where a lot of things fall apart. So by being able to have a platform where everybody on a project or from a corporate level are able to communicate opportunities, that allows individuals to apply for these and in change, creates change. One of the other things I can show you in here is, again, our organizational directory. It's the same type of thing. These are all the organizations in Canada that we work with. There's not all of them, but these are definitely a lot of the ones that we do work with. And as you can imagine, so how many times have you heard on a radio? How many times have you heard by your colleague or by anybody in these events that there's wage subsidies available, there's training dollars available, there's all these things available by either directly through provincial or federal governments or through organizations like the Native Women's Association of Canada. But how do you access it? So I've been asked this 1,000 times. We hear all these great things, but how as an employer do we even access it? So if you were to go to a government website and try and punch up wage subsidy, well, you're going to be there for 7 days trying to figure out where in the government of Canada you can access these things. So a big part of what we wanted to do was we wanted to set up programs so that when anybody wanted to learn more about any wraparound support they can do, so this is for New Brunswick, they can get a hold of JEDI, and JEDI may have all kinds of programs available. I know through the Native Women's Association of Canada, as an employer, we were able to get wage subsidies. If we are going to be hiring an Indigenous woman to go to work as an apprentice, we can almost get the majority of that paid for. We can get their hours that they work on a job site paid for up to 75% sometimes. So there's these huge supports, and often organizations are left with these dollars, not knowing how to spend them, and they have to give them back, which means that they lose their program funding for the following year. So the idea behind this is that we've created the space for employers to post their jobs, post their opportunities, post everything. We've created a space for for communities to showcase themselves, showcase their community, showcase their businesses, showcase their people, and provides a path to engagement to their community. And then the last thing, and of course, the individuals, we have the resume builder and everything. And then the last piece of this is these organizations. And so what we've created is kind of like a service hub. And we do this whatever province we're working in. For instance, in Ontario, where I'm sitting right now in Thunder Bay, we've formed a partnership model with Yes Employment Services and Contact North. And so, and And the reason we did that is because working warriors can't do everything. And I learned that lesson in construction when I started as a maintenance company, and it turned out being an everything under the sun company, which isn't necessarily what I wanted to do back then, but it's just ended up what happened. So I didn't want to become a training company. I didn't want to become all these things. I just wanted to be able to partner with groups that are already doing this. And so our model here in Thunder Bay is pretty simple. In the building that we share with Yes and Contact North, we have the ability for individuals to walk off the street. They can walk into Yes's in the building here. They can get help with their resumes. They can get help with all kinds of things, including training programs that are available. We have a partnership in place with Contact North, who has service centers throughout. I'm not going to say every community in Ontario, but I definitely will say the majority of the communities across Ontario. So what Contact North is doing in those communities, again, is helping with education and training. So if we work with a client in Ontario, and so again, if say it's a mining company or construction company or Walmart, Safeway, hotel chain, doesn't really matter. And they say to us, sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I keep wiping my nose. If they say to us that, this is our need for the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to need 100 people in with these disciplines. Well, we have the ability to now engage communities that are in remote areas, as well as the community members that are living in urban centers, and we're able to develop a training program that is going to lead to employment. So if the employer says that these are the jobs that are available, we can then turn around and over time, and usually at no cost, be able to engage the individuals, bring the individuals in, do the training, do everything that we need to do, and then turn around and supply those individuals back to industry. So working in collaboration is a huge thing. I know everyone talks about silos and working in silos and everything else, but it really, my biggest advice to anybody out of everything is working in collaboration wherever you live, whether or not you're in Southern Ontario or Northern Ontario, where I am. There are organizations that can support you. And a lot of the organizations we talk about are National Women's Association of Canada or Native Women's Association of Canada. These are national organizations that are easy to access. And I really, really encourage everybody to try and understand what supports they have in their region and how they can support their organization, whether it's a community or whether or not it's an employer. It's very, very important to understand all of that. So lastly, when we get to this, so we've got everybody on board here. Now the idea is to share these opportunities. So here's our job board. And the job board is accessible to anybody. This isn't just for Indigenous people. This is accessible to anybody in Canada. Companies can come on here and post a job. It's pretty simple. If you're not logged in, you just basically log in. It's just like signing up to anything like Facebook is your email and username. You can come in here. You can post a job in here. One of the challenges that people always seem to have is they don't put their closing date in here, which makes it difficult to post a job. So ensure you always have your closing date. Anyways, the job, where this is going to be posted. So this is going to be job shown on the national job board, or is this only going to be shown on your profile page? Job description, where this thing is posted, what type this is going to be, if this is going to be a training opportunity, a job opportunity, or an education opportunity. Contact information, of course. Again, show your contact information of your company on there, yes or no. All this information comes in here. And then once this hits save, it goes back to us and the individual companies that have, for companies that have their own profile set up, I don't have to check anything because we're just scraping their jobs. So if there's any funny business happening on their end, it's their responsibility. And I know 100% of the time it never happens. But for individual jobs that are coming in that are not part of that, we get these jobs that are waiting for approval every day. So this is for a corporate sales manager and a heavy duty equipment. We just simply hit approve, and those jobs then are shared to our homepage. And this is where everything is listed. So again, individuals can come on here and they can apply for these jobs. So this is a job for ATCO. You can see the full details of the job. Here's everything involved in the job, everything you need to know on here. And when you're ready to apply, you just simply hit this button and it'll take you directly to the ATCO site and directly to this job. So essentially what we're trying to do here is, if you go to the job board, is that all of our communities across Canada, we have companies from across Canada that have joined the Working Warriors platform and that are posting all their jobs into the site. So these ones are featured at the top. So this is, Suncor, major energy company in Canada. Their profile and all of their jobs are on this one page. Again, mining company, Vale, same thing. These are all their jobs. So the idea behind this is to bring not only a space for the companies to showcase their jobs, but a space for multiple companies to be able to show everything they have to offer, and so that this now goes to all of our Indigenous communities across Canada. And so whether or not it's the human resources people in the community, whether or not it's employment training in the community, whether or not it's an individual living in a community or living out a community, they have access to their community profile, to their individual profile, and they have access to see all these jobs and apply directly to them. The last thing I'll show you, and then we'll just get to questions and answers, is we also have a business directory that we've set up. So two things are the most important when it comes to providing opportunities to communities and engaging with communities is, like I said in the beginning, is number one, ensuring that we provide opportunities for the members of the community to apply for jobs. And the second one is a local business directory. And so again, when you release, as anybody who receives RFPs, and if there is an Indigenous component to the RFP, they ask two questions. Tell me how you're going to engage with the local community and how you're going to hire local members, and how are you going to engage with local businesses and utilize those local businesses in your agreement or in your project. So much like companies who go to say, okay, we're going to call the community HR person and find out about people, it's just as big a challenge is for communities to provide information on the local companies they have. And so what we've built into this, which will be completely rebuilt in 2 days. On Friday, I think we're gonna have our brand new business directory up. It's really slick. It's got a map. It's got everything in it. But for now, what we have is a business directory in here where you can sort by, you can search, by business name and location and everything. So this is a company called For Evergreen Resources. They're out of BC. So again, gives you the map, gives you the point of contact, and it gives you the information. So again, if you read this, For Evergreen Resources LP is the officially designated and authorized flagship company for the Saltoo First Nations for natural resource development. So anybody who wants to engage with this community for business reasons understands that you've got to come to here for anything to do with natural resource engagement. And so we're not going to go on and list everything that we do, but much like the flyer for the community that talked like the history and the origin, much like the flyer that the employers had that talked about all their Indigenous engagement policies and practices, this is the same thing for Indigenous businesses. It's a flyer that talks about exactly how you can engage the communities and with all the information that you need to be able to do that. So again, here's all the phone numbers for general manager, finance, administrative, all these different types of things all the way through that. So it gives you the ability to understand who to talk to in the community. It gives you a list of the community-owned businesses, and it gives you a list of the ability to engage all the communities within that, within community members within that community. So with that information, you as an individual should be able to create an engagement strategy that is based on real information, not on fictitious information. So by that, I mean, we're not going to set up a partnership model that says we're going to hire 20% workforce when we only have 5%. We're going to say to the communities, and we're going to say to the employers straight up that this is how many people can participate in this job. And if it's zero, it's zero. And so then we're able, the reason they call them impact benefit agreements is how is the community going to be impacted positively and negatively. So the positive side of this impact benefit agreement is that if you understand that on a job that may be complex and they may not have the community members available to do that, well, there is zero impact to the community members if there's zero jobs. So we have to look at something different than as an employer as to how we're going to benefit the communities. That might be through training programs. That might be through educational programs. That might be understanding, does the community even have an HR program in place? Often on projects, we've helped communities set up their HR programs and set up their Working Warriors databases and everything so that they have that when the project is done. So anyways, that is a lot of information I've shared. I'll stop sharing my screen. we've got 15 minutes left, and I just wanted to open this up. Mercedes, if you wanted to do your thing in terms of questions and answers. I apologize if I was bouncing around all over the place. Like I said, it's been 17 years building this thing. I think it's important for everybody to know as well that I didn't build this because I had to. I built this because I wanted to. I have never, I've self-funded this entire program all the way through. I've never had any funding from the government or from employers or from anybody to build this. And so we're quite proud of the work that we're doing here, and the more people that we can work with or share our story with is going to lead to more people in the communities that we work with be able to get some of those opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie. The point that really resonated with me was the collaboration and communication across organizations and tearing down silos. I think that message can really stick to, it can transcend just the employment industry or this project specifically into all the different fields that we work in within Northern Ontario.
Yeah, and an example would be, so I just got a call this morning from this company. They're looking for construction laborers in Thunder Bay. So now we work together with our local communities, with Yes Employment, with all of the groups that we have here now to assemble those individuals, get them trained up, and then ship them out the door. Right. So just another example of things that we're doing.
Absolutely. Perfect. So now we have a few questions in the Q&A chat box. One of them, there's a few by the same person, so I'm going to try and do my best to summarize these. There's a question about community listings in provinces outside of Ontario. So how are these populated and maintained, and how can we get involved in this process in filling some of the gaps outside of Ontario?
Yeah, no, we have, like I said, there's I think close to 400 communities across Canada. So if you click on the communities tab, no, can I still share my screen? No, I can't. Doesn't matter. If you click on the communities tab, sorry, it'll give you a list, and it's all filtered through that. So from Nunavut to New Brunswick to British Columbia, all of the communities that are currently in the working wear system across Canada are all in there. And it's as simple as, if you are a community, you want to get involved, it takes all of less than 5 minutes to set up a community profile. And if you're an organization or employer that wants to assist the communities to get going, it's simply the same thing. And I should note in here that Working Warriors and all the services that we provide, um, we do not charge any money for individuals to be on this site. We don't charge any money for organizations or nonprofits to be on the site, and we don't charge anything for communities or individuals to be able to be on the site. It's 100% free. So the only fees that we charge are for companies, and that is to host their platform on our site, and then the suite of engagements, the consulting services that we have.
Perfect. Great. So we have a question and a comment from Stephanie. So she says, congrats on this impressive work, Jamie. Can you talk a little bit more about how Working Warriors adopts a distinction-based approach to reach Inuit and Métis communities and candidates?
Yeah. So what we've done is, when I started this whole entire program, is all based on relationships, and this is why this has taken 17 years. Is that this isn't something that we would just email a community or call them on the phone and say, "Do you want to be part of this program?" I've been to hundreds of communities across Canada, and the way that was set up was that is that we work directly. We call it a community readiness strategy. And so we work directly with the community to help them organize this, and sometimes it's done through summer students. So again, a summer student will be hired within the community, and that will be their role for the summer, is to gather all the information on. And it's always a community-led project. This isn't, you're not gathering information, because you have to understand that communities have been studied and inventoried and everything, relentlessly for all these years, and nobody wants to do another program where they're just providing information on for nothing. So it's always been a community-led program, and we've always used the guidance of the nations in terms of how we gather this information. So although we have all of the communities in Nunavut in place, we did that by, we hired we had an employee. Unfortunately, she's passed away now. Her name was Kelly Fraser. She was an Inuit artist, and she worked for Working Warriors. And so we hired her to do all the engagement because of the language barriers and everything that was available. We hired Kelly, and Kelly had the language that was needed to be able to engage all the communities. And so that's what we did. We started off with Kelly. She went in and she talked to every single community, explained the program, explained everything that we were doing, the benefits of it all, and then helped to build that. What we haven't done in the northern communities is actually work with the communities to do their skills inventory. So the communities can either do that themselves, or that's something that we assist communities in doing. As for the Métis, so we work with different Métis groups. I think the Métis Association of Ontario and BC have profiles in the working warriors. So again, whether or not it's the MMF in Manitoba or wherever the case may be, we work with those organizations. And again, because Métis members are scattered throughout the country, they're not localized really into too many places. It's really up to the individuals to be able to come on and I guess attach themselves to that Métis community. But yeah, it's the same thing. If you're a Métis individual and you're looking for jobs and it's specific to projects, we work with all three Inuit, Métis, and First Nations groups. So I'll tell you right now that, as you all probably know, that starting these relationships is a very difficult thing. So when we started this in Ontario and Manitoba, we needed the relationships with chief and council, employment training, and elders and everybody to be able to support the growth to the next community. And second to that, again, coming in and saying you're going to do all these great things works well in the beginning, but it's really showing people that you're going to give them a job and that there's jobs available. And that's really, where you get people to listen. Is I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to learn about your community. I'm here to learn about your community members, challenges, everything that you have in place, and from that, develop an engagement strategy that's going to benefit you, right? That it's not just going to be something that we have to check a box for. And that's a big difference in Canada. We have a lot of companies out there that are going to do the bare minimum. They're going to check the box that's needed to be able to proceed. And then you have companies that are really looking to build programs internally and be able to support things like their Indigenous engagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers it.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, we have a few more minutes, so please leave them in the Q&A box down below, and we'll do our best to get to them. So we have another question from an attendee. What was your biggest challenge in building Working Warriors?
Trust. Trust. Number one, I am not Indigenous. I'm Scottish and Irish. And so what was the Scottish and Irish guy doing in all these communities and wanting to work with these communities? It must have been for money. He wants money. He wants money. And taking advantage of First Nations people to make money. Well, this program cost me $3 million of my own dollars. So this wasn't about making money. This was about spending a lot of money. And so the biggest challenge I had in the beginning was convincing communities the reason why I was doing this. And the reason why I was doing this was genuine, is I truly felt that I had a role to play in working with communities in Canada or wherever I was to ensure that they had opportunity. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you're doing a project in downtown Thunder Bay, then so be it. People have jobs to go get they could work at Walmart, they could work wherever they want. But when a project comes to a First Nations community in the north, say they're going to build a water treatment plant, that might be the only source of employment that the community members have for years to come. And so it's critically important that we have a good engagement strategy in place to be able to do that so that those members receive those opportunities. So number one was getting the support from the communities. And I had to work all the way through. So levels of government, former Grand Chiefs and Grand Chiefs of the AMC Grand Chief, and all the way through the whole hierarchy of the Indigenous community. I had to work and I had to prove myself, and we proved ourselves through jobs and providing opportunities. And so that was number one. And number two, again, was the employers. A lot of employers did not want to participate in this for two reasons. Number one, they didn't know how. Again, it's employers, I think, see risk in a lot of work that they do with the nations. And I say that because if they don't have a proper program in place, and I don't just mean let's say again, a mining company, but if a mining company doesn't have a good program in place and that program doesn't stretch all the way through the supply chain, it adds risk. And when risk is involved, people just say, okay, we're not going to do it. So and if you're going to build something and you invite all these communities, or sorry, these companies to participate, and if those companies don't have a good plan in place, the risk for you as a company is that they're going to ruin your relationships, or they're not going to be able to fulfill what you have said you're going to do as an organization. Second of all, is um, companies see it as risk in terms of their bottom line. So if you're a company, let's just say, and you're going to build a water treatment plant in Attawapiskat, and you're going to bring your company up there and your workforce up there to build that site, you know the efficiency rates and how you're going to bid that job is based on your ability to do that with your staff. Well, if you're asked in the project or told in the project that you must engage and utilize all these community members, well, your efficiency rate of how you're going to build that may go down based on their experience. And so what companies always turn around and say is, well, who's going to pay for any of these inefficiencies? Who's going to pay for the engagement of the communities? Who's going to pay for all of this? So communities, do one of two things. They either look at the RFP and say, we're going to do exactly what's told in the bare minimum, or they say, we're going to put together a plan. But when you put together a plan, how do you know that the company beside you is putting together something that's going to cost $0, and what you're putting together is going to cost $1 million? So it's starting to price you out of work. So a lot of companies shied away from the engagement side of things because of the risk and because of the costs associated with the engagement, and that it often wasn't apples to apples for all employers that are bidding on this work. So being able to provide this platform for employers is the whole idea behind it, is to alleviate some of that risk and provide that path. So trust by the communities was hard to come by, but we gained that over years and years and years. And it wasn't jobs, it was being in the communities. We developed a cultural festival for Northern Manitoba. We've done all kinds of things. We do an elder youth hunt every year in Northern Ontario, where we bring elders and youth together, and we pick traditional medicine, and we're hunting, and we're doing our thing, and that really builds that relationship between you and the communities. And so me as an individual, I represent working warriors, and the communities I work with know that I put my best foot forward in everything that we do. So those would be the two for sure.
Perfect. And talking about building trust and making relationships, we know those things take time. What advice can you give other organizations or individuals looking to form meaningful partnerships with Indigenous communities?
Don't start in their boardroom. Don't start in their band office. Go somewhere first. They have a powwow, they have a baseball tournament, they have anything going on. And it doesn't even mean that you as a corporation have to support it. Yes, by giving your $1,000 to support a ball tournament is nice and it's needed, but put in a team. Go in there and sit at a powwow and have a Pepsi and eat some bannock and talk to people. And it's all about relationships. And it doesn't really matter where you go. If you're in any situation, relationships need to be established, and you can't just bust in the door and expect to have one immediately. My advice is to reach out to your local communities, to understand some of the things that they might be doing, and any job fairs that they may have, and just listen. Just get in there and listen. And by listening, you as an individual or an organization, if you are interested in getting involved, by listening, it's going to explain to you exactly how you can do that.
Perfect. And for our last question, we just have an attendee asking if you could reiterate how the Working Warriors platform works to advocate for diversity and inclusion, maybe in a few sentences.
Holy, well,
I know you have to cram a lot into that, but
that's a deep one. Well, so if you look at it like this, we've got all these communities and all these individuals that are tied to all these communities across Canada, and how we advocate for diversity is by really working together as employers, and that's the end of it. Going to trade shows, much like going to communities, is building those relationships with those employers to be able to say to them that, there is a way you can do this that removes the risks, that removes the money figure, that removes all these things. And that's what I'm out there doing, is I'm out there trying to show employers that this isn't as hard as it looks. Although it's very complicated, there is a path forward to be able to do that. So by convincing employers that there is a path, is going to lead to opportunity, and that opportunity is going to lead to diversity in the workplace.
perfect. Great. Well, so that is the end of our our question and answer session, I'm going to share my screen with just both of our contact information on it. So if you have any questions, or you want to follow up on this session or talk to Jamie or myself directly, you'll be able to do so. Here we go. And I'd like to thank everyone once again and thank Jamie as well for discussing Working Warriors, and thank you all to all the attendees for coming out today and for your great questions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye now.